US President Donald Trump demanded Iran's unconditional surrender today. Earlier, he said he should have a say in who becomes Iran's next supreme leader. Mr. Trump made the remarks on social media just hours after Iran's president said that unspecified countries had begun mediation efforts in one of the first signs of any diplomatic efforts to end the conflict. Iranians have reported some of the heaviest bombing yet as the conflict widens. Israel said 50 of its warplanes struck a bunker beneath the destroyed Tehran compound of Ayatollah Khamenei, which it said was still being used by Iran's leadership as a military command centre. There were airstrikes too in southern Beirut, where hundreds of thousands of people have been ordered to evacuate their homes.
The heaviest night yet of Israeli and US bombardment left Tehran's skyline smouldering once again. It's a scene repeated across the Middle East as this one-week-old war expands and evolves. Israel said its fighter jets had destroyed an underground bunker in the heart of Tehran, used as a command hub by Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the first day of the conflict. Those who mourn the supreme leader protested against the war in Tehran today. Those who do not mourn him have been warned by senior Iranian officials not to take to the streets. As Israeli defences intercepted further Iranian missiles, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian spoke of moves by unnamed countries to mediate an end to the conflict. As US officials warned, they were just getting started.
Our commitment to our mission objectives only increases as our advantages continue to increase. We've got no shortage of munitions. Our stockpiles of defensive and offensive weapons allow us to sustain this campaign as long as we need to. If you think you've seen something, just wait.
We pray for wisdom from heaven.
Accused by some of starting this war on a wing and a prayer, the US president received a blessing.
I pray for your grace and your protection.
Donald Trump says he wants to help choose the next Iranian supreme leader, and he called for Iran's unconditional surrender. But the imminent chances of that appear unlikely amid fears that this is a conflict, the scale, scope and impact of which will only continue to grow. Fiona Mitchell, RTE News.
Well, authorities in Lebanon say more than 200 people have been killed in Israel's offensive against Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran. Aid agencies say 300,000 people have been forced to flee after Israel issued large-scale evacuation orders for hundreds of villages in South Lebanon, parts of Beirut and villages in the Bekaa region. The United Nations has described the situation as a major humanitarian emergency.
Wave after wave of fighter jets bombard an ancient city. Beirut's war-weary residents once again plunged into chaos. Israel says it's targeting Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah, hitting command centres and weapons storage facilities. Scores of residential buildings and shops are now reduced to rubble, with smoke billowing around once bustling streets. Israeli attacks are concentrated on the southern suburb of Dahiya. The densely populated area is predominantly Shia Muslim and contains large numbers of Syrian and Palestinian refugees. Israel issued forced evacuation orders yesterday, but the UN says they are very difficult to comply with.
Our colleagues on the ground hear every day about the anguish that people face, about not knowing where to go, not knowing how long it will take. Obviously, this raises serious concern under international humanitarian law.
The Israel-Lebanon border is fast becoming one of the fiercest fronts in this war. Israel launched overnight strikes in several areas, with local media reporting fatalities in the cities of Sidon and Tyre. Hezbollah says the attacks will not go unanswered and issued evacuation warnings to Israelis near the border. But Israel's government and opposition leaders are in agreement. A zone similar to the Yellow Line in Gaza should be created, removing 2 or 3 Lebanese villages. But many residents are unable to flee to the relative safety of the north.
Not everyone was able to leave. This is not something that we talk about, but there are elderly who cannot leave their homes. There are people living with disabilities who cannot leave their homes. And there are people who simply do not have the means to leave their homes, even if Israel issues those forced displacement orders.
Lebanon's Prime Minister has slammed both Israel and Hezbollah, saying his country has been dragged further into the abyss, drawn into a conflict it did not seek nor choose. David Landy, RTE News.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to journalist Rania Abouzeid, who is in Beirut. I began by asking her to describe the conditions there following the latest Israeli strikes.
Well, it's been another day of airstrikes and of Israel issuing forced evacuation orders for entire towns. Now, this is a new phenomenon. In the past, they would issue these notices for particular buildings, but now they are issuing them for entire not only towns, but regions. Last night at around 3 p.m., they issued one for the southern suburbs of Beirut, which is a very densely populated area that is home to hundreds of thousands of people. And today I was on the streets speaking with some of the people who had been forced out of their homes very abruptly. There were women who were still in their slippers. They literally left with the clothes on their back. The lucky ones managed to put some things in plastic bags that they had around them, and the very lucky ones managed to strap mattresses to their cars as they fled. The numbers are increasing by the hour. There are at least 500,000 people who are now displaced. The government is scrambling to try and accommodate them in makeshift shelters. They've turned schools into shelters. Mosques and churches have also opened their doors. But there are still many, many people who don't have anywhere to go. And they are on the streets of a very cold Beirut.
And where are people fleeing to?
People are trying to head north. There are some people who said they were stuck in traffic jams coming from the south for like 15, 17 hours. This is a journey that usually takes about 2 hours. That's just an indication of how many people were on the roads trying to flee to what they hope is relative safety.
And what's likely to happen next, Rania? Is there an expectation that these military strikes will continue?
Israel has said that they will continue their campaign until Hezbollah is obliterated, until it's disarmed. And Hezbollah is saying that it will not surrender. It won't surrender on the battlefield, and it won't surrender its weapons to the Lebanese government, which recently, in an unprecedented decision, declared the party's military wing illegal. And it told the party to focus on its political activities. So, both sides are entrenched. The red lines are clear. And as usual, it's the people in the middle who suffer the consequences.
All right, Rania Abouzeid, journalist in Beirut. Thanks indeed for speaking to us on 6-1.
Thank you.
Well, the United Nations warned today that this conflict is spreading like wildfire. Let's speak now to our global security reporter, Yvonne Murray, who joins me from New York. Yvonne, these hostilities are now affecting at least 16 countries, according to the UN.
That's right, Sharon. And the UN Secretary-General warning that this is a conflict that could spiral beyond anyone's control. UN agencies on the ground talking about a major humanitarian crisis and the mass displacement of people. And also the ongoing shock to the global economy, affecting perhaps the most vulnerable, according to the UN Secretary-General. We're also seeing the dots between global conflicts being joined up here now, with the Americans turning to Ukraine to ask for advice on how to shoot down Iranian drones, which Russia has been using in Ukraine for the past several years. The US now talking about ramping this up, which they clearly intend to do. But they'll also be aware, Sharon, that there's pressure growing here at home on the US administration. Opinion polls showing that the majority of Americans don't support this war. Incidents like the bombing of the girls' school last Saturday, killing hundreds, penetrating the consciousness of the American people here, and also the effect on gas prices having an effect. But nevertheless, the American administration is clearly now looking for an exit strategy, whether that's in the form of somebody from the Iranian regime taking over, someone that they approve of, or supporting the Kurdish Iranian opposition forces. There's no indication how long either of those strategies might take, but also crucially whether either of them could possibly be successful, Sharon.
Global security reporter Yvonne Murray in New York. Thank you for that.
A flight chartered by the government to bring stranded Irish citizens home from the Middle East has been delayed. The flight, which was originally due to depart Oman this evening, cannot take off until tomorrow afternoon. Let's go to Dublin Airport now, where our reporter Aisling Kenny is standing by. And Aisling, why was this flight postponed?
Well, Tommy, as you said, that government flight, chartered flight from Oman was due to take off tonight, has now been delayed till tomorrow afternoon. I understand the reason for that delay is due to the highly volatile, highly changing situation on the ground in Oman. Now, that flight was due to accommodate very vulnerable people, older people, younger people and people with medical issues. Now, the Department of Foreign Affairs has said that any costs incurred for staying overnight in Oman will be paid by the department tonight. The cost of that flight is €800 per person, and anyone under 16 will go free. Now, separately here at Dublin Airport, the many flights to and from the Middle East have been cancelled today. The DAA said 12 out of 14 flights to and from the Middle East were cancelled, all flights to Doha and all flights to Abu Dhabi. There was one inbound, one outbound flight to Dubai that did take off. Now, that inbound flight in here into Dublin Airport is due to arrive within the next hour or so. Many changes have been made to flights. The main aim of that outbound flight back to Dubai is to get the aircraft in situ in Dubai to turn around to bring more passengers back here to Dublin Airport tomorrow. But as I say, Tommy, continuing disruption here at Dublin Airport. Passengers travelling to and from the Middle East are urged to check with their airline's website on their flight status.
All right, Aisling Kenny at Dublin Airport. Thanks indeed.
The Irish fuel industry has rejected accusations of price gouging in the sector. Since the outbreak of the war and the disruption of the global oil market, the cost to consumers of home heating oil has shot up. The price of Brent crude oil has risen by almost 10% today, to the highest level in almost 2 years.
Since the outbreak of the Middle East conflict, oil prices have surged on global markets. It has led to significant jumps here in the cost of motor fuel and home heating oil. Prices at many pumps have gone above €1.80 per litre for unleaded petrol, and in some cases have reached around €1.90 for diesel.
I'd have my own places for going to town here, and they put it up by about 15 cents a litre.
Last week it was 176 for the lower and 171 for the lower one, and then 176 for the bed. Now it is 181 and 186.
The increase is more pronounced for home heating oil. According to price comparison website oilprices.ie, the average cost for 500 litres of kerosene has risen from just over €495 on this day last week to more than €833 today, a 68% increase. Industry representatives were called to a meeting today by the Enterprise Minister to explain their price structures and the price increases, which are being investigated by the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission.
The last time we had this conversation was in 2022, in the immediate aftermath of the invasion of Ukraine. The CCPC did its investigation then, and it found then, just as it will find this time, that the wholesale prices were absolutely responsible for the increase in retail prices in Ireland.
Speaking after the meeting, the fuel sector rejected accusations of price gouging, insisting the increases have been driven by the global wholesale markets. The Enterprise Minister described the meeting as constructive.
We want to ensure we have fair competition, we want to ensure we have a level playing field, and critically that we have supplies up, and that's going to be very important in the weeks ahead, and we have a very strong supply at the moment.
Minister Burke also said it was brought to his attention that some forecourt and heating oil depot workers are experiencing abuse. Behaviour, he said, was unacceptable. For Gal O'Brien, RTE News.
Well, returning to those airstrikes on Lebanon throughout the day, just before coming on air, I spoke to Marcoluigi Corsi, the UNICEF representative in Lebanon, and I began by asking him what it's like where he is in Beirut. We are seeing images of explosions throughout the day today in Beirut. That's where you are. Can you describe to us what the situation is like there?
Yes, indeed. Explosion have started in Saturday last week, but has intensified during the week, and particularly yesterday, when an order of evacuation was triggered by the IDF to evacuate the southern part of Beirut. So this basically created a massive evacuation and displacement of people, which of course moved to a safer place of the city. So at the moment, we have estimation of close to 300,000 people in Beirut moved from the southern part to safer zone. And that has been creating a lot of challenging because, of course, the government has to set up a collective shelter where to accommodate the families who had to flee their home without basically nothing, in addition to the ones that already fled their zone, the southern part of the country, during the last few days.
300,000 is an enormous number of people to have to flee and to leave their homes. Where are they going to? What kind of accommodation?
So the government has set up up to now 412 shelters, which are mainly schools. But this they can accommodate only up to 95,000 people who have been displaced. The majority actually of the people who have been displaced, they are living either in cars on the streets, or they have been find some places with close families or friends. But the majority, again, they are living outside the shelters.
The UN and the Lebanese Prime Minister have warned that a humanitarian disaster is looming because of this. Do they have access to food, water, healthcare?
So food is not, at the moment, is not a big problem, but certainly, the structures, these collective shelters which have been set up, they are not equipped for accommodating such a large number of people. So these are mainly schools, let alone the shelter which have been now set up in the public areas, which of course need to be supported with water tracking, water system, latrines, to avoid waterborne disease or preventable disease which might come when such situation are occurring. So I went and visited over the last couple of days a couple of shelters. Indeed, people that are sleeping on the floor. Some of them they have been given, of course, the mattress, but the needs are great, and we see that if the situation the situation will continue in the next days and weeks. There is indeed a need for a better place where accommodate the children and their families.
From the outset of this conflict, when a school in Iran was struck, children have been caught up in these hostilities in each of the countries that have been impacted. What would you say to those people who are making decisions to launch airstrikes on populous civilian areas?
Look, the international humanitarian law is very clear. I think civilians and children should be protected at all time, and any action which are harmful for the children and the civilians should stop immediately. So that is really the message that has to be conveyed.
OK, Marcoluigi Corsi, UNICEF representative in Lebanon. Thank you for speaking to us on 6-1 this evening.
Thank you.